homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. My name is Jennifer, and we are making tamale pie. And tamale pie is basically a chili that has a cornbread baked into the top of it. It's very simple. You can make this a million different ways. I've seen many vegetarian recipes for this where it's just beans. I'm going to make this tonight with ground beef. You could use whatever meat you had on hand. It's a great way to use up things that are in the fridge. And actually, one of the random things I'm going to put in there that would not normally be called for is I have some extra roasted cauliflower that we did cauliflower tacos with about 4 or 5 nights ago. And they were good. They weren't great. It was a big old head of cauliflower, and it's been seasoned with kind of Latin spices. It's got cumin in it. And so I'm just going to throw the extra leftovers into this tamale pie, and it'll be a good way to use that up. And my other main inspiration for this is I pressure canned a chili base this year. So tomatoes, peppers, and onions with some chili powder and other seasonings in it. But one of the cans did not seal. And that's not the end of the world. It occasionally happens. Maybe there was something left on the rim. I'm not sure what happened. But I have an extra jar of it that just didn't seal. And so it's been in my fridge. When I realized it hadn't sealed, I just threw it into the fridge, and I want to use it up before it goes bad. So we're going to use that chili base as the basis for this. And then, of course, the other lovely, lovely part of this recipe is that cornbread that's on the top. And because I've moved further and further away from doing a lot of wheat, I am older, and I find that the wheat tends to give me inflammation in my joints, and so I'm just a lot more achy if I eat a lot of wheat, which I miss because I love all things bread, and literally have been a bread baker for many, many, many years. However, this recipe for cornbread is not one. Most cornbread recipes that you come across are half wheat flour and half cornmeal. This one is 100% cornmeal, and I just was talking about this recipe in a earlier video that I did this week on green chili, because that's a great recipe to serve with green chili. And I thought it would be fun to include that recipe in this video, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are now avoiding gluten a lot more than they used to. And it's a really good 100% cornmeal recipe. And the fun thing about my cornmeal is that I actually grow flour corn specifically so that I can make my own cornmeal. And that was something I never thought to do. I thought, gee whiz, that's just kind of silly. And then one year, just for fun, I grew an heirloom variety of corn. And when I ground it up and made polenta out of it, it was a revelation, because I have never really liked polenta. I've always found it to be just kind of meh, not a lot of flavor. And with this particular cornmeal from this heirloom Hopi flour, I could not stop eating it. It was so good. And so I realized, the type of corn really does make a difference. And the commercial corn flour that you find in the grocery store is really just not all that. It's been bred as a commodity crop, and it's been bred for transportation and yield and not for flavor. And we're losing a lot of our heirloom heritage corns because corn hybridizes so easily. It crosses. You need to grow corn in a 2-mile isolation in order to keep it from crossing with any other corn that might be out there. 2 miles, people, that's a long way, assuming that your neighbor doesn't have, some variety of sweet corn, or that your other neighbor who does commercial crops isn't growing field corn. It's very hard to keep corn pure. It is a wind-pollinated plant, and so it's not like you can throw a net over it to keep the bugs off like you can with a lot of things. Anyway, so I'm kind of passionate now about corn. If you want to know more about growing corn, I highly recommend Carol DePee's book, Resilient Gardener. She has an earlier book that also talks about corn. She's got a PhD in botany, and so she's kind of an amazing breeder. It is basically a master's degree education in corn when you read her work. Very fascinating. If you don't have any background in biology, it might be a little over a lot of people's heads, although it's written for the layperson. It's not exceedingly technical. But yeah, that chapter on corn in Resilient Gardener basically was an inspiration to grow all different kinds of corn. All right, I am going to put just a little bit of grapeseed oil in this pan. And this is my big 12-inch Field cast iron skillet. If you've never heard of Field, this was a gift to myself a couple of years ago. They're an amazing quality cast iron company. Lodge is great, but Field wanted to know, why is it that the really old cast iron, the Wagner and the Griswold, were so much better and so much lighter than traditional cast iron is now. And so they kind of did a deep dive on those questions, and then they ended up starting their own company where they were going back to the original foundry methods for making cast iron instead of the current method. And what you end up with is a slightly lighter pan and also a smoother surface. And so they're still rough enough that they will take a nice seasoning, but they aren't that pebbled texture that Lodge seems to have now, where it's really not very smooth on the bottom, and so it makes it harder to clean. I love this pan. It was well worth the money. So definitely an investment, and they've gone up in price quite a bit since I bought this. But yeah, if you've got a little extra money to spend and you want to spend it in your kitchen, I highly recommend Field. Not a paid promotion, just a company I've had good experience with. So we're going to saute off. This is about half an onion, about a cup of onion. My chili starter has some onion in it, so I'm not going to do the whole onion. And then I've got a whole bell pepper, mostly because I still have a lot of bell peppers left over from this year that I haven't cut up and frozen yet, and so it's an opportunity to use one more. They're so good. We had a very long growing season this year, longer than usual. Usually we get a frost about the second or third week in October, and it is currently October 30th. And we still haven't gotten a frost. We're going to get one next Tuesday. And so we've had a really long season. And because of that, I just had a really, really good pepper year. And so I still have a lot of sweet peppers that need to be used up or frozen that are in my cooler right now. So we're going to saute these up, get a little color on them, and then we're going to add in that ground beef. Nice pinch of salt. When you're sweating vegetables like this is always a good idea. Helps draw out the moisture. While this is going, I'm going to get a clove of garlic going. I'm pretty sure that I'd have to look at the recipe, but I think my chili starter has got some garlic in it as well. So I don't need to add a whole lot here. And look at this, for almost the first time ever, I actually have my compost bucket in my sink, so I don't throw all my vegetable scraps into my sink and then have to pick them out later, which is what I always end up doing. I don't know why that is. I can't seem to get my head around the fact that I just need to move the bucket. And while this is sauteing, we will also start measuring out and working on our cornbread. And so the total amount of cornmeal in this is a cup, but I'm going to do 1/3 cup mixed with 1/3 cup of hot water. And what that's going to do is gelatinize that cornmeal. If you've ever made polenta or added cornmeal to something to thicken up a broth, you know how that works. And the gelatin that happens when you mix it with hot water, this water is boiling, is what actually makes this bread stick together and not just crumble, because there's no gluten in it. And so if you didn't have something in here, it would just crumble and not hold together. And so this really helps with that. feel like I might have added just a little bit more water than I usually do because I make this recipe all the time and that looks surprisingly soupy. So if you make this and it looks less soupy, you've done it right and I did it wrong. Okay, to that we're gonna add 2/3 of a cup more flour. This is my half sift and method where I just fluff it up right in the container. This is not my favorite container of grain. I usually have wider mouth containers, but I don't go through a ton of cornmeal, and so this is just in a smaller. Trying to scrape this without dropping it all over. Little color on here, definitely not gonna hurt anything. A little roasty toasty. All right, to this I'm gonna add a 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. 2 teaspoons of sugar. You could leave this out, but it does balance it quite well. And it's considerably, I mean, 2 teaspoons, most standard cornmeal, cornbread recipes have at least 1/4 cup of sugar in them. So 2 teaspoons of sugar, 1 teaspoon baking powder. And I am an absolutely huge proponent of baking powder that does not have aluminum in it. I don't know whether it's really a medical issue or a health issue, but I can taste it if it has aluminum in it. And I have sat in commercial bakeries and eaten their bakery food, and I could tell that what I was eating had aluminum baking powder in it. So if you are at all sensitive to that, just look for brands. I think there's Rumford is one. There's another one, Gabber Girl maybe, also doesn't, or at least makes one that doesn't have aluminum. I am not a fan of aluminum in my baking powder. And then, you know, there's a lot of stuff about aluminum for health reasons that you don't want to consume it. I don't know how legitimate that stuff is, but why not? You know, it's definitely, it's an inexpensive product. It's not worth the additional risk to me. All right, that's looking good. I think we're going to add in our ground beef. And this is local ground beef. It's pretty lean. This is grass finished, if I remember correctly. And we're just going to get this in here and get it browning. And that's going to release some moisture there as well, so. All right, back to this. We need 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And you should make sure that your baking powder and baking soda are fresh. It's really easy to have them just expire in the cupboard and you not realize it. So check the expiration dates on your boxes. Replace those at least once a year. And then it calls for 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk. I don't keep fresh buttermilk on hand, but this is a powdered buttermilk that works just as well. America's Test Kitchen did some great testing showing that it was exactly the same. I'm gonna run this through a little sieve just because it's very, very hydrophilic. It tends to absorb moisture from the air and clump up a little bit. And so I just want to make sure there aren't any hard chunks in there. This is pretty fresh, so it should be pretty good. And it's a tablespoon per 1/4 cup. And so if I need 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk, I'm going to need 3 tablespoons of this. But I love having this on hand because basically you always have buttermilk in your kitchen this way. And I'm going to give that just a quick whiz around just to mix in so we don't have a big pile of leavening in one spot. And then even though that buttermilk theoretically could just be used with water, I always have 2% milk on hand. I don't usually have whole milk in the house, and so I just use regular milk. So there's our 3/4 of a cup of milk to add the liquid portion. And I also need 1 whole egg. I've really become a proponent of 1 bowl I've seen a lot of that lately, and Smitten Kitchen, who I love, does a lot of one bowl dishes with baking. And it's like we spent so much time being precious about wet ingredients and dry ingredients and having to mix things together in a certain order. And I think everybody's just over it. We would rather do fewer dishes and just not, if it lessens the quality by 10%, we're willing to take that 10% loss in order to do less dishes. So this is our corn batter, and then we're going to add this is 4 teaspoons of melted ghee. So basically butter with the milk solids removed. You could use bacon grease in this and it would be very good. I just happen to have the ghee on hand. And the last time I made ghee, I overcooked it just slightly. So basically it's like a brown butter ghee. So it's got a ton of flavor. We're gonna add some cheese to this before we put it on our dish as well. And sometimes I'll have one side of this skillet is a little hotter just because of how it's sitting on the stove, and I'll just move the handle back and forth from my left side to my right side, and that often takes care of that issue where I'm getting just a little bit of sticking on one side because of the way it's heating. I really need to put these big pots away. I was doing a ton of canning, and so I got them out of storage and I need to put them back in. I'm pretty much done for this season, but I haven't made the trek to go put them on the high shelf where they normally live. They are empty and clean, just not quite put away yet. It's browning up nicely. Give that just a few more minutes. And we're gonna bake this directly in this cast iron pan, which is one of the main reasons I'm using this cast iron pan. If you wanted to sneak more veggies into this, shredded zucchini would be another nice addition. I think it would just disappear. You guys, this is the very last of my tomatoes from the garden. And obviously there's some in there that need to get eaten. I'm starting to get fruit flies, so I'm gonna have to come up with something pretty quick to do with those, but considering it's almost November, we did okay. Although they came a little bit late this year. I think I picked my first tomato late July. So August, September, October, we got a good solid 3 months of tomatoes for fresh eating. That was pretty nice. I pretty much never buy tomatoes at the store. Once in a great while, I'll buy some cherry tomatoes for something, but yeah, I don't eat fresh tomatoes except for when they're in season 99% of the time, so. All right, this is looking good. Give that garlic a chance to get a little bit of heat on it. I am not gonna put zucchini in this because I'm putting cauliflower in this, and that's enough. We do need to shred up our cheese. And this calls for about a cup of cheese, which is about 4 ounces. And you could do less. You could leave it out altogether. It's just a nice flavor addition. You all know how grating cheese is one of my least favorite kitchen tasks. I don't really enjoy it. I've never had great upper body strength. That's probably why I dislike it so much. It's definitely kind of an upper body arm thing. It's not helping that I have 2 different pieces here because I cut my first piece too small and so had to do a second one. All right, good enough. All right, we're gonna add in, this is 1 pound of frozen corn from the garden from 2021. We didn't do any this year because I had quite a bit of it left. This is gonna be pretty full. And again, you can mix and match. You can do all kinds of different things in this just based on what sounds good to you. This is a great, almost no rules recipe other than it's gonna have some chili powder in it somewhere. because that's part of the whole point of a tamale pie, and then cornmeal on top. But other than that, use what you got, use what you like. If you wanted it really spicy, you could do poblanos or jalapenos in this. I'm gonna go pretty easy just because I think there's some pretty good spice in my chili mix. I'm gonna throw in the rest of my roasted cauliflower. And then I also have this partial jar of home canned pinto beans that already have a bunch of Mexican spices in it, because that tends to be how we roll. So I just can the spices in with the beans. So I'm gonna use this up as well. This is a great recipe for just using stuff up. I hope I don't end up overfilling this. It's definitely gonna be a little tight. We'll see how we do. Basically, we want everything to be heated through so that when it's in the oven, what's really happening is that cornbread is cooking. The rest of it should be completely cooked so that you're not relying on that part. Okay, so there's that. Worst case scenario, I can always take some of this out and use it for something else. Here's my chili base. See the fact that I was able to open that with my fingers? It's a pretty good indication it didn't seal the way it was supposed to. So this is mostly tomatoes, but there's peppers and onions in this, and then a bunch of chili powder and cumin and other glorious spices. I think what I'm gonna do when I cook this is I'll put it on a cookie sheet, and that way, if it does cook over, I'm not gonna make a huge mess of my oven. All right, what I'm gonna do is cook this down so that a lot of that liquid has boiled off, and then it'll be ready for our cornmeal topping. So we'll be back in a few minutes. All right, I've cooked this down for about 20 minutes to evaporate off a lot of that liquid that was in there, and it's thickened up nicely. I'm gonna add in my cheese to my cornbread. I'm gonna do my best to spread that out so it doesn't clump up. Give that a quick stir. I have a feeling even though I had boiled this, I have a feeling my water was a little bit on the cool side, or at least not 100% boiling when I added it to that third cup of cornmeal, because this is usually a little bit thicker than this. Not a ton thicker, but a little bit thicker. And I think that's what happened. All right, and we are just going to, let me get a cookie sheet out here, just in case this does boil over. Hopefully it won't. And then we are just gonna spread this on top. Yeah, it all fits, so we should be good. My oven is heated to 425, which is the temperature I would use if I was just baking this alone. Slide that in there. All right, we'll be back in about 20 minutes to see how that looks. All right, I ended up cooking this for 25 minutes. I gave it an extra 5. It looked like it was pretty much done, but because it's so moist underneath, I really wanted to make sure that the dough had completely set. So I was a little worried about not cooking it long enough. Look at that, holy cow. It did boil over just a tiny bit, so it was good that I put that cookie sheet under there. You can see this is nice and firm. It's not gooey. That looks awesome. It also seems like all the cheese is right here. But we'll give that 5 or 10 minutes to cool and set a bit, and then we will try it for dinner. All right, this has had a bit of time to cool off. The obvious thing here would be to cut this into wedges, but I don't think getting a pie wedge out of this big skillet is really going to work, so I'm just going to do blocks. That cornmeal feels nice and firm. Tricky bit is getting this out of here. You can see that cornmeal is cooked all the way through. That's definitely what we were after there. That looks amazing. And because we cooked a lot of the moisture out of it, it's not super goopy, which is also great. I think what would be really good on this would be a little bit of avocado. Let's see if I let this sit on the counter too long before I threw it in the fridge. I haven't had it for very long, but it seems a bit lumpy. Oh, that looks beautiful. Perfect. I really think when an avocado is about perfect in ripeness, you should be able to do this. If it's not ripe enough, you can't peel it off. And if it's too ripe, the skin breaks and you can't do it. But I love when they're perfect and you can actually just peel the skin with your fingers. That is gorgeous. A little sour cream would be good on this. You could top it with salsa or hot sauce. A little cilantro. So lots of different ways to go. A little fresh chopped onion, pickled red onion, many different things that you could do based on what you had in your fridge and what you were in the mood for. Tonight we're going to go with beautiful avocado. So there you go, tribe. Tamale pie, a perfect pantry staple fall meal that is just perfect for these crisp, cooling fall nights. It's savory, it's meaty, it's healthy. Yeah, definitely a winner. Give it a try. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.